Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic is increasing English proficiency and confidence naturally through language immersion programs. My name is Micah Sturdivant. The class is TS720XA, Second Language Acquisition. Today we're going to talk about the usefulness of these programs, the need, and the strategies. To begin with, let's consider the goal of immersion camps. These camps are similar to all language programs, whether they're in a university or in an elementary school. They have to address the same issues in all of their learners, the same problems. The first problem is communication apprehension. This can be the same for a master of a language or a beginner. Sometimes you're just nervous to speak to someone new. Perhaps you're nervous to talk to a foreigner. Perhaps you're nervous to talk to someone in a different social class than you. Anything that makes you apprehensive to actually engage in discourse is something that has to be considered. And it adds a little bit of nervousness to our L2 learner here. He's getting a little worried. Then there's also the issue of perceived competence. Perhaps you think that your language skills are much lower than they actually are. This makes you less likely to actually try to speak to anyone else because you'll worry that you won't be able to make yourself understood. You might feel foolish. You might be perceived as being foolish. Despite how much you've actually learned, you don't know yet how good you are at the language. Oh my, getting a little more nervous whenever we stack on social norms. There's different norms for every culture. Who speaks first? Who speaks last? The way you actually address perhaps what you consider to be a superior in a culture. Every language has little rules for this, Korean being an example. It actually changes the entire language, the way you speak to anyone. And if you don't understand the social norms of the culture you're interacting with, you worry if you're going to make a mistake. Am I going to offend someone by the way I'm speaking? It's another thing that inhibits discourse. And when you take into effect attitudes, is this actually useful? Am I learning anything? Am I wasting my time? Your attitudes about the program, your attitudes about anything in life can inhibit you. Why would I even try? I'll never learn this language. It's too difficult. Then we have motivation. When we speak of motivation, we're describing, is this instrumental, integral? Am I trying to make a lot of money? Am I trying to move to another country? Why am I learning this? Do I want to get to where I can really engage people on a personal level, or is this all academic for me? What do I want? And then there's just a variety, a million other factors that come into play. All of these inhibit discourse. All of these inhibit students' ability or desire to communicate with each other. Without communication, you cannot grow. You cannot practice your skills. These are things that immersion camps have to think about. So, immersion camps have a few different goals that we'll go over. They attempt to address all of these issues using different strategies from typical schools. For one thing, camps, like other schools, they employ foreign ESL instructors. Naturally, this is advantageous because someone from a country who speaks English or any other language, they're natural experts. The pronunciation is typically considered perfect, at least for the area that they're from. This allows scaffolding. But there's another benefit to this, something you need to think about. These immersion camps are having students from different countries coming to them to engage with these ESL instructors. And this is generally the first chance students have had to interact with a foreign L2 expert. So this is the first chance to see, what is this person like? How can I be comfortable talking to this person? What about their culture? Can they tell me about their country? This lowers the barriers of communication that makes you more comfortable, and hopefully in the future they won't feel so nervous when speaking to foreign experts or to anyone. You see, the most important goals of these programs are not necessarily about learning the grammar or building up your lexicon. I mean, of course, They are important, but the main point is to lower anxiety of students, make them more comfortable to use their language. If your students are not comfortable using their language, they cannot learn. These programs want to promote the confidence and to address their individual motivations. It shows, yes, if I use this language, I really can build up my skills. My motivations can be met. I can learn this to get a job. I can learn this to meet new people, to travel the world. And once they're really motivated, they have confidence, and they've lowered their anxiety, the hope is it will encourage them to use this language the rest of their life to continue to build their skills. Even if they don't want to be experts, it can really help them to get better. Now, let's consider the desire for these type of programs. Currently, there are billions of people who are interested in learning English. Consider countries like China, South Korea, Japan. Just in Asia, the urge is amazing. The need, the want, the feeling that this is the way to a better life. I want you to consider the intensity of the students in this video. See how enthusiastic they are.
Perfect. 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 I want to speak perfect English. I want to speak perfect English. I want to change my life.
As you can see, there is a lot of intensity, a lot of desire to learn English. That's why these camps have been growing in a lot of countries in Asia. Countries like Korea, where this picture is taken, this is Gyeonggi English Village. As you can see, they have put a lot of money into this program, built in a very impressive place with many, many facilities. But China and Thailand and Japan are also investing in these type of programs. So there's a large desire for immersion-based language training, especially in Asia. But there's a history for these type of programs that shows the usefulness of them. Consider Canada. Canada, as you know, has English and French speakers. That's the native languages of Canada. And French immersion programs have been being implemented since 1965. There is a long history of immersion-based language learning. And generally it's been shown to be very successful by many studies, by many sources. Parents have been very pleased by the amount of French that their students are picking up and the manner in which they're actually learning it through immersion-based programs. This trend has continued in Thailand, for example. One of the studies that you can look up at the end of this program in our references shows the attitudes of many students in these immersion programs to be very positive. At the end of these programs, they felt very, very comfortable engaging with foreign experts, engaging with each other in their second language. They gained a lot of confidence. They addressed the issues that these programs were designed to address. So it's very, very useful. These studies show that this is not just a fad. This is a very useful lifelong type program. But why? Why is immersion-based learning used? What is the history? To address this, let's look at some of the theories, such as the naturalization hypothesis. As we all know, this theory considers the way that babies learn their first language. And it considers, well, what language do children begin with? I mean, are children naturally born speaking Spanish and suddenly, after immersion to English-based parents, they pick up English? Well, absolutely not. Children don't begin with a first language. It's not based on biology. It begins with no language, so that's the consideration of the naturalization hypothesis. And the maximizing language input theory addresses this. It suggests by avoiding the first language in the classroom, by avoiding explaining things in the first language, the teachers are able to maximize the useful L2. Example. The L2 is the only method of communication in this class. for anything, even for things not based on the subject. It should be in the second language. Here, we have a gentleman, tengo que ir al baño, es muy importante. And perhaps the language instructor understands perfectly what he's saying, but he's very sorry, but in this classroom, we do not speak Spanish. So unable to get his point across, even in something not related to the lesson, we have to change how we say it. Please let me go to the bathroom. That is very, very important. That's more like it. Certainly you can go. This is, of course, an exaggeration. Emergencies and situations like this, if you understand it, should always be immediately addressed. But the point remains that the L2 is intended to be the only language of communication. And the point also is that if the L2 is not experienced in a meaningful way, it will always remain arbitrary and odd. Here we have a teacher addressing the class with a donkey, a t-shirt, a chair, and a dress. What does this mean to someone who's just looking at these words? These are just words. For all we know, a donkey is, oh, a teddy bear. This must be the donkey. And a dress. A dress is very delicious. I love to eat some dresses, yes? Because there's no true context. This is very, very true, especially in China. Take a look at this video about the typical way children learn vocabulary in China.
Billion of them.
Now this does have pictures at least, but it's not really engaging in the second language. It's just parroting, rote learning. Some studies show this can be useful for building up the vocabulary, but other studies show that it doesn't create the natural links between the symbols and the language. So, that is why the L1 is not used in these immersion-based programs. Now, when we're dealing with children who are learning a second language, we have to take into consideration their wants and needs. When they hear a language-based camp, they don't consider this to be school. They don't think they're going to show up to a place and it's the same as whenever they go to their private institutions to learn language, or whenever they spend a few hours a day practicing their vocabulary in class. So when they show up, they hear, we are going to study for this entire camp, a week or a month. Is everyone very, very excited? No, that is a very big letdown. This is not what they came here for. Do you think this is going to be a blow to actually getting them to interact? It's going to be a huge blow. So, when we're dealing with younger students, consider their priorities when they're engaging with each other. It's the same as any child's priority, regardless of the language. They want to socialize. They want to talk about silly things. Your hair's so cute. Oh, I really like this type of candy. Yeah. And they are interested in playing and having fun. I mean, admit it, whenever you were in elementary school, you were just looking at the clock waiting for, recess, recess, recess. So, how do we maintain the use of an L2 in these immersion programs when these children have these motivations? We can use different strategies to try and ensure that they communicate with each other and with us. As everyone knows, teacher presence is a huge motivator. They feel a little nervous, they'll just, while you're around, they'll talk in English. And let's consider this scenario. Every teacher faces this whenever you're teaching any subject. The teacher, standing right here, very close to everyone, they're having an interesting discussion. They'll talk about it in great detail. This is wonderful. They're truly engaging themselves in the second language. They're naturally going to keep doing this, so I can feel free to go and check on this other group. And suddenly, tangsa nun ko young poet chi nan mat. I can't pronounce this very well, but the gist is, did you see that movie last night? It was so funny. So they've gone back to socializing which would be okay except for this. They've gone back to socializing in their L1. The teachers walked away. They feel comfortable enough to return to their first language. This is inhibiting the immersion-based language learning. So a strategy that these programs use is grouping, different grouping strategies in immersion programs. There's some very exciting, interesting ones that I want to talk about. And they're all designed to foster communication naturally, but each have strengths and weaknesses. Now, as I was saying, there's interesting twists on the typical groups. In any classroom, we use different strategies. Strong learners with weaker learners, putting the similar learning groups together to address them in the same way. But consider this following group, this type of scenario. This is one-way immersion. In this, the majority of the classrooms are actually native speakers of the L2. We have our language learner here, and let's say 3 people who speak English fluently. They don't speak any of the first language. So, the language minority is grouped solely with the majority L2 speakers. The hope, of course, is scaffolding. They're going to pick up what these higher level students are saying. And the language majority is viewed as the control to help measure the progress of the L2 learner. So, the hope is I'm going to pick up so much English from all of these perfect speakers. But, even though this type of program has been used for many, many years, and it is the experience that the majority of L2 exchange students encounter, there are criticisms. Example, there's the argument that this strategy forces a student to achieve fossilization much faster because they're interacting solely with experts. This expert says it's this way, that's the way it must be. There's no other way to say this. They haven't built up slowly. They haven't found the other ways of expressing themselves. This is how it is. Everyone says it how it is. That's how I'm going to say it. So, that is a consideration. Also, anxiety and social integration are very, very much affected in these situations. Consider this. This student is going to worry about their own competence, one of the main problems that immersion programs are supposed to consider. You're dealing with complete experts. No one wants to sound very foolish in their language use. It's especially children, it's very damaging for the ego, and the anxiety is very, very strong. So they're not going to interact. They may give short 1 or 2 word answers, yes, of course, but they're not going to have true discourse because they're very, very worried and they can't keep up with the regular conversation of an expert. This is going to lead to social isolation. They're the only person in here who speaks this language. They can't truly interact. So this can be counterproductive to this type of immersion program. Another immersion program that has been useful in these groups is multilingual immersion programs. As we can see, everyone here is learning the same second language, but none of these students share a common first language. This is an interesting spin on one-way immersion. So, the hope is that all of the students who, as we've said before, want to engage socially is one of the priorities. They will interact socially and productively in the only shared language that they have, the language that they are studying. It's an interesting program. Now, by encountering students who only share this common L2, it can be a great motivator for some of the following reasons. They want to socialize, they must use their L2. Well, as an example here, if we're trying to talk to each other, 안녕하세요, to this gentleman who does not speak Korean, okay? There's no real interaction here, just words. So we have to change up the strategy. We have to see what we can do. We have to try. Hello? Hello, how are you? And we're understanding each other. Very exciting, very exciting. And they will want to socialize. They'll want to interact with each other because this person's from another country. This is an opportunity. You can finally learn something about this country, about another way of life. You can ask questions. Some of them might be silly. Is a tree you only eat, etc., blah, 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 in your country? A silly question that a child will ask, or an adult. You don't know. This can lead to real interaction. No, we only do this, but something else interesting about my culture is that we'll eat this here and then we do this. And there's real discourse. There's real L2 use. So, this can lower cultural anxiety and promote discourse. And when lower cultural anxiety in the future, they'll be willing to talk to people from all different kinds of countries to really try and use their second language. They'll be motivated. It's not so scary, it's not so terrifying to talk to this person. This is a very interesting and useful program. But consider this. Oh, Americans are so fat, they just love their guns. I only like my guns, meanie. Here's the issue that can come up. Culture, religion, ideologies, they can clash, especially among younger students who haven't really gained the filters they need. They can say something that can be very, very hurtful to another person, not because they're trying to be hurtful, just because they don't know how to really interact with this person. This can be the downside to multilingual, multicultural immersion programs. And unfortunately, something we have to always consider, the current political atmosphere. Is there something occurring between countries that can cause clashes? An example that I have observed, the island of Dokdo, highly disputed between Japan and Korea. This gentleman maintains Dokdo belongs to Korea. No, it belongs to Japan. These are things that shouldn't really matter to children, but nationalism can present itself to anybody. We all have certain feelings that this is the way it should be. If you say it's not, you're wrong. And this leads to a problem. Of course, let's punch each other. Fine with me, because you're wrong and I'm going to show you. Especially with kids, I've seen fights break out among children from different countries or from the same countries. It's so easy because they're very passionate. So teachers have to be skilled mediators in these situations. They have to be able to redirect. And they have to know what's happening in the world so they can head off these situations. Sometimes it's impossible. But generally, if you're able to talk to your students, able to intervene before things get out of hand, you can change it. Here's our teacher. That Justin Bieber sure is a happening cat. Suddenly, we have common ground. I concur. I also like him for some strange reason. I don't understand it, but it is a useful strategy. We've redirected, and we're hopefully restarting discourse, restarting the conversation, promoting L2 use, and hopefully preventing an incident, an international incident actually. Now, another program that's used in many schools and also in immersion programs is the multi-level program. So we separate students based on their perceived language level. The examples could be blue for beginner. They'll be labeled as blue because we don't want to put something on a piece of paper that we're going to give to the student that says beginner. That can be a significant blow. I've been studying English for 10 years. Why am I a beginner? So we'll just say they are blue students and group them accordingly. You can say, my name is Bobby, I like this, I am from, etc. Next up we could have, let's say, yellow for intermediate. Hi, my name is Bobby. How are you today? They can begin to have real conversations. Their pronunciation, their vocabulary, and grammar might be a bit low, but you can really actually interact and hold discussions with them. Off you go. And finally, we have green for advanced students. They can talk about a plethora of things. This gentleman wants to talk about the current political issues of the day. Generally not. They may have a very high level of language, but generally they're still kids. They want to talk about what they want to talk about. It's not going to be advanced things. That's generally for school. They've had enough of that. They want to have real discourse. Talk about what they are interested in. Off you go. Advantages to this program are as follows. There's evidence that collaboration between L1s is very advantageous in promoting language growth. You see, they're able to better relate to each other due to the following factors. Cultural similarities. They'll have a lot more to talk to each other about. There's a comfort level there. We have the same culture. You understand how this is supposed to be. We have the same history. I'm more comfortable actually engaging even in a second language with you than with this strange American who I can't comprehend what he wants to talk about and makes me very, very nervous. Ooh. And they have the same common linguistic issues. They can understand the things that they are struggling with. Pronunciation issues. Yes, we have the same problem with the L and the R. I understand that. I'm not going to make fun of you for this. I know where it stems from. Where someone who doesn't understand their first language, they might just, no, la, 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 ra, ra, ra. Just say it a million times and you'll finally get it, instead of lacking the understanding that it's a single phonetic item in their language, very difficult to overcome. And they have common world knowledge. They've grown up in the same areas. They understand the same things about the world. As silly as it is, and sometimes sad, they might all agree that Dokdo is Korean, so they won't be those flare-ups of ideologies, which can be safer but inhibiting. But disadvantages that occur. We have to rely upon other institutions to determine the language level. Generally, schools or parents. Oh, little Bobby is an expert. I've been working with him. You can trust me. No, I can't. Because he is just at the beginning, and you're inhibiting his growth by actually lying to me like this. But we have to rely upon them, because we don't have the time, generally, to give a test to every student who's coming in. This is short-term learning. And of course, code switching due to common L1. The same scenario we saw before. Teacher walks away. Este es muy bien. ¿Qué quiere hablar como? Oh, este es el maestro. Hello, let's talk about this again. They'll switch up what they're actually talking about. They always do. So, how can we keep them on task? We have to have content that can motivate various age groups. There have been studies in second language acquisition that's really pointing to the importance of fun and language play for understanding and using language among children, even among adults. There's high correlations between, naturally, smiles and laughter and language development. If a child's smiling and laughing, they're really interested. They're activating their knowledge. They're really processing what they're doing. You can tell if they're enjoying themselves, shifting in the voice quality and pitch. We've all had the students who will stand and give a report. Today I'm going to talk about bunnies and why bunnies are so very important for blah 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 blah. They're not interested. They're not making a real connection. If they're having fun, if they care about what they're talking about, you'll tell. Oh my gosh, everyone, I want to tell you about my new truck. My truck is so amazing. It is, how can I say this? How can I say this? Really cool. They will work to try to engage with you because they're having fun. They're enjoying themselves. and they will actually use the language that they've mastered. They won't try to give you a book report with words that are outside of their range. Like, today I will tell you how to delineate between different things. They don't use that. That's not real conversation. That's a book report. They'll use the words that they've mastered, and they can slowly build up to new words. Very useful. It promotes true conversation. So, how do we engage children in immersion camps? Children love language play in their first language as well as in their second language. We've all seen this. You're a monster, I'm the handsome hero, and we're going to climb this and that. Roar! He's going to eat his face. They're engaging each other. I mean, this is just a silly game, but they're using their language. Now we have our teacher here. And our teacher can encourage this tendency and structure it. Students, here's a game. You're lost in the woods with your dog. What are you going to do? And this allows them to be creative, but in a structured manner. I'm going to eat my dog. Don't eat me. No, no, no. They'll be laughing. They'll be giggling. They'll be really interested. So we can create specific classes and activities, projects that can encourage this language play. I mean, drama productions can be utilized in many different ways, and we can change them to accommodate our students' level. You might think your very blue students can't engage in such a manner. They only know a few different words, but if you give them the tools, you will be very, very surprised. So, we also have cooperative projects we can have. An example in many immersion programs would be cooking classes. I mean, this is content-based learning, but it's also immersion, because we're encouraging everyone to continue to use their L2, and while you're giving instructions, you're using the second language. You need 3 eggs. We are going to whisk this. And while you're describing whisking, you can be doing it. You're making real correlations between the language and the symbol. Oh, whisk. A whisk is a whisk, and you can whisk something. And it's a kinesthetic way of learning as well. Very, very useful for certain language learners. We can have outdoor activities. I mean, this is a typical game for summer, playing with the ball, but we can interact. Okay, you need to put this in the purple area. Now shoot it to the yellow area. Okay, it needs to go higher. I mean, we're engaging in our second language, but we're having fun. We can have natural conversation during this. Oh, that almost hit you. Yeah, it almost hit me. And I mean, it's just fun, but it's real conversation and discourse. Adults often go to these L2 camps as well. But how do we engage adults in a different way than children? I mean, consider the motivations of adult students in our camps. Children want to have fun, they want to socialize, and I'm not saying adults don't, but generally adults who are going to these camps, it's for instrumental reasons. They are considering English to equal money. Alright, if I'm able to get better at English, I can promote myself, I can make more money for my family. They're not as interested in fun and wordplay. That's not their motivation. But we should not throw social and fun-based learning completely out the window for adults. It can be very useful, especially the social bonds that are formed through cooperation in such activities. Studies have shown that these really promote second language use, because adults have the maturity to police themselves, be like, we're speaking in English, and they have real bonds. They're cooperating. They will try to discuss things in greater depth. These scenarios have been very useful in camp settings, and they've also been utilized in more traditional settings. We have mock trials. This can be very useful for discourse if you do it correctly. If everything is set up as a speech, he will be guilty, she will be not guilty, then the point is lost, of course. But if you use team-based cooperative learning, we have defense, we have prosecution, we have a judge, then they can really interact. They can come up with their strategies. I will ask him this, but you don't know the answer. So you really have to actually use your language skills when you're interacting. Teachers can perform the role of a judge and say, that's not allowed, or preferably as a bailiff, leaving the judge to be played by another student. The bailiff can help structure everything. Your Honor, I believe now is the time for the prosecution, or I think the defense would like to do this. You can give prompts to help facilitate the actual trial. A lot of students really love this. Everyone loves the cop shows. They really enjoy engaging with each other, especially adults, because they have the vocabulary usually, they have the maturity to do this properly. And conference proposals. A lot of the students who come to these camps, they are in business. They can make conference proposals in their first language that will stun you. So this is a skill they already have. But if we can get them to use this skill that they have in their second language through team-based projects, it's a way to link something they're naturally very good at and practice speaking in front of an audience in a second language. It can promote confidence. You can have question and answer periods during this as well for evaluation and just to facilitate discourse. You do need to make sure that your students are engaging each other in their second language while creating these, of course, because there is the tendency to try to just, I will look up this word in my first language and translate it. Let them know the point isn't to make a perfect conference, the point is to actually engage with each other, and it's very, very useful. Studies really show that a lot of students love this. Adults, generally children, not as much. And, as I said before, we shouldn't completely dismiss fun-based learning. Dramatic productions for adults can be completely different than for children. As I said before, they will police themselves and they have the maturity, the age to come up with their own stories. You can just give them a scenario and guidelines and they will work really, really hard to make something very entertaining. They'll want to record this. They'll want to really interact. They'll want to turn this into a competition. Who can do the best play? Who can play this character best? Who can win at this? Who can win at that? And it really, really promotes conversation. No, I want to say this. I want to be this actor. As long as you're making sure that everything is being said in the second language. Very, very good. It's used in many, many immersion programs. This could last a day or an entire week of production. It could be the entire purpose of the second language camp, to create a production using your second language. We have to take these considerations, though, for adults and production-based tasks in these camps. We need to have willing and motivated students to act as agents of interlanguage. If we have students who are not comfortable with speaking with each other, then it's not going to work. The whole point is for the adults, for the children, to speak to each other. And frustrated students, they may feel the urge to switch back to their L1. You have to promote an atmosphere of only second language in a comfortable manner. Students can critique themselves and also critique themselves, and this can really build up the vocabulary, build up the confidence, as long as it's positive. But cultural norms can inhibit honest critiques based on hierarchy. This person is my boss, I can't tell them he speaks in this way. If they cooperate, though, and use their L2 to accomplish a common goal, it really builds the confidence. But a higher level student can dominate a project. You have to consider this. There are possible weaknesses to immersion programs I will briefly cover. You can go back and look at them in more detail, and the links will show you exactly their definition. I want to talk about the possible weakness of only L2, which is the basis. studies that argue that only relying on the L2 can be inefficient, and that we should reconsider the use of L1. As I said, this really challenges the entire point of immersion-based learning, the camps, and the entire immersion-based system. The arguments I will go with come from a study by Cook, and it's an interesting read. I do think you should check it out. You can find it in my references. And Cook argues that L1 should reinforce L2 for the following reasons. That the L1 can create links with and can promote understanding of the second language. And that by using the L1, teachers can convey meaning in a better way, in a way that the students already understand. And they can also use it to truly explain grammar. This is like this for the same reason that in our first language this is like this, and so on. And you can use this to organize the environment. You can speak in your first language, you need to sit over here, now you sit over here, please sit here. And it makes things go smoother. To a point, I can agree with this for organization, only to a point though. The methodologies that challenge immersion-based language programs are as follows. The alternating language methodology promotes switching the language at different parts of the lesson, perhaps explaining the concepts near the beginning and then going to full-based immersion later in the lesson. The new concurrent method will have the teacher switching to the first language at key points to stress this. You see, class, we say this in this manner because in our first language, da-da-da-da-da-da. The community language learning maintains the interaction in the second language, but is monitored by a teacher who is utilizing the first language. Everyone's interacting in the second, but perhaps the teacher will say, no, you need to say this in a different manner. Let me explain, using my first language. We have to consider these criticisms, though, because we have to think about the availability of teachers who are fluent in both the L1 and the L2. How many teachers are there out there who can really be perfect in both languages? Especially considering how many languages there are. And there are dangers for a teacher who are not fluent in the first language. Because consider this scenario. We have a teacher, we have a couple of students. Mal mi cabeza esto correcto. Take my advice, this is completely correct. But the perception is he wants us to take his head. This teacher thinks he's completely fluent. Oh, I'm completely understanding myself, making these students understand myself perfectly. But there's a big gap between his perception and the reality. This can make some serious problems. And then there's just the simple fact there isn't evidence for a perfect way to teach yet. So we need to stick with what we know, what we actually have evidence works. In the future it might turn out that yes, using the first language to reinforce the second is perfect. But for these programs, there's not enough evidence to completely change them yet. To summarize, let's consider the benefits of these programs. The first is that it's cost-effective. True immersion programs, sending a student to another country, they cost a lot of money, they take a lot of time. Now, they can be a lot more advantageous for truly mastering a language, but for our purpose of building confidence, lowering anxiety, this works very, very well. For a short term, to show I can use the language, I can make myself understood. Because it's creating a comfortable environment to interact with foreign experts. Not only that, it's creating a comfortable environment to use the language with other L1 students, whether they're from your country or from another country. A few things to consider, though. It's less efficient than true immersion, as I said before. True immersion can increase your skills very, very quickly. Also, you have to have motivated students to be successful. If your students are coming to these camps because their parents told them to, they will not get a lot out of this. they have to have a reason to learn. They have to have an interest in learning, or you're just going to have a student who will sit there for a week and retain nothing. And they can bring down the rest of the class if they're not interacting with each other. The entire point is to use this language with many different partners, not just the teacher. So, to summarize, the entire point is to create motivation, to reinforce the motivations, to lower anxiety, and to build confidence. And for this, these programs are very, very useful. They're growing in popularity in many countries. They're growing in popularity even in European countries. So, if you're interested, I have a works cited page here with a lot of different references that reinforce the ideas in here. And like I said, Cook's article is interesting, and it makes you think about a few different things for language learning. I personally don't completely agree with the viewpoint, but it is something interesting to consider. I hope this has been very useful and interesting and can help change your ideas on what immersion is set to do and how it can be implemented in a variety of situations, and how short-term programs can be very advantageous to L2 learners. Thank you very much for paying attention to this and for listening. I put a lot of effort into this. It's something I really care about, and I really hope it's useful. Thank you very much.